okay? And there were 20 Rastafarians in Chestnut Ridge. And they certainly don't need a house of worship on 5 acres. They want to have a residential house of worship where these 20 Rastafarians can come and worship. And that's their right, to have a place to go and worship. This law would allow them to establish that small house of worship in a residential area for those 20 people who happen to be Rastafarians.
Well, so
It's that
okay. Well, I'm only going by what's written here, okay?
That
Regardless
doesn't
of
mean it's gonna
what's
be
written
your-
here, it says to remove impediments to the free practice of religion, such as allowing for smaller scale places of worship, customary to Orthodox congregations, which are precluded from driving on holy days.
Correct.
It's just
Okay,
an
all right.
example.
That's
But
correct. That's an example.
I understand the examples.
It's just an example, but what I'm saying to you is true for any religion. This is what I'm trying to say.
This is criteria that's being established.
That is criteria, universal criteria.
I understand that.
So, but
Okay,
you're,
so
you're
you're not-
approaching a slippery slope. You are
You
approaching.
don't know where I'm going.
Oh, I know where
What
you're going. You're
What am
approaching
I-
a slippery slope.
No, you haven't.
Okay?
I don't know.
They let me
Bottom
finish
line-
my
I'm not
point.
in it. I don't know.
Excuse me.
Huh?
The neighborhood house of worship law is setting up 3 different levels
Okay.
of neighborhood houses of worship to accommodate the various religions that may not need 5 acres. Maybe they need a half acre, maybe they need an acre, maybe they need an acre and a half. Okay? It is not for one particular religion. If there happens to be a particular religion that fits all 4s of that, that's fine. That is fine, and there's no law against that. However, we have to provide an accommodation for everyone. That's why you've got 3 tiers. And part of those 3 tiers will now have the neighborhood house of worship being proposed go before the planning board for a formal application process with notice to everyone as to what's going on. And then the 3rd tier, being the biggest, would come before this board here for a special permit. We've only had to entertain 2 of those, the Coptic Church and the Forster Church, to my knowledge, right now, as we speak.
So based on my understanding of what I've read, okay, absolutely consideration was taken with regards to the original limitation of the religious house of worship having to be on 5 acres. So for the community one, there's language in here that says, well, perhaps it will not have to be 5, maybe it'll be 3 or 4.
Correct.
But the neighborhood and the residential house of worship clearly was defined to allow for those religions and beliefs that are not allowed to drive during the...
No, not necessarily.
Then why is...
It's just an example of
If-
why it's necessary to have a local place of worship in the neighborhood.
As a Roman Catholic, I have to worship at a church, okay? I have no choice to worship at someone's home. But if I was if my religion was to the degree that I want to be able to go to a house of worship with 15 other people, I could drive there. And I'm going to go drive on Eagle, and I'm going to go meet with 15 other people of my same religion, and I'm going to go in that person's house, and I am going to worship. And that person's house is going to be on a half-acre property. However, they would have gotten approval to have their house of worship on that half-acre of property, having gone through an application process. And I can drive there. I may have to drive to Dexter Park, and I'm going to go over there. But this is not geared to one particular religion.
Then why was that included?
It's
Why
an
was that?
example.
Just
If
like
we're
legislative
if we're
history.
changing the zoning laws because we have a concern about limiting houses of worship on a particular amount of property size, why was that language put in there?
You know,
That
Ms. Martin,
example wasn't necessary.
I'm not going to be able to satisfy your question. All I'm going to tell you is that this
I haven't
law.
asked it yet, but that's okay.
Oh,
That's
well, then
okay.
ask the question. I thought that was the question.
Well,
Why are we doing it
I
that
already
way?
see that we're dancing around the logic, that we're dancing around what's written here, and I'm
We're
sorry
not
for
dancing.
using.
If we were dancing, I'm a bad dancer.
Well,
You would
that may be obvious as well. I don't know.
Ask your question, please. Please ask your question.
I want you to understand that the federal government created a religious land use law that says
Right.
you cannot prohibit the worship of any religion.
I read the law. The law clearly states that you cannot impose regulations on a religious house of worship that has not been imposed on other areas that were requesting the same type of permit, which is why I asked that question in the beginning. Okay, have we ever been in a situation in this village where a storefront, grocery store wanted to build a store on Chestnut Ridge Street, and they were allowed to, and the Rastafarians wanted to build their house of worship on that same street, and they couldn't?
I saw you no.
That's what we're talking about.
And I said
Okay,
no.
right, exactly. So back to the same question: why do we need to change? If now there are other places that have been in a situation where they clearly discriminated, and therefore they had to change their laws because they outrageously discriminated.
I answered your question, Ms. Martin. I said because zoning laws and laws of the village are not static, and that you need to evolve with the community and with the population of close to 8,400 people in the village. Just because something is good today doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stay good 3 years from now. You have to revisit it, and you have to improve it. You have to sometimes supplement it. So that's what we did, and that's what I told you.
You don't have to write a law to tell me that I can have people in my home to worship. I can do that without you writing a law.
You're absolutely right. You're
Right, and you
absolutely right.
can't do anything about it. Right.
However, there are instances where once it becomes a formalized gathering, in that you are a formalized house of worship, and that it's no longer just a prayer group meeting or whatever the case may be, for safety and for site approval purposes, which the law permits us to do, we are going to provide guidelines. And that's what we're doing with this law. Because you know what? Tomorrow, you can have a prayer group in your house, and you can do whatever you want to do. But soon as it becomes a formal house of worship, for everyone's safety in that building, and for the community convenience surrounding it, we should know that makes sure that it's safe, and that everyone has an opportunity to have weighed in as far as what's going on there. But you're absolutely right. You can go next week and have your prayer group, and you don't need one permit for it.
We are trying to put order into what people are probably doing. We'd like that if you are going to have a synagogue or a church in your property or in property next to you in a house, that it provides the correct, as the mayor said, it's safety features, sprinkler systems, ingress and egress, ample parking, whatever. So by trying to bring into the auspices of this law, we tend to then try to protect the people of this village. We also are encouraging more people to establish in one place, rather than a whole bunch of other places, their houses of worship. The reality is that because of our lupa, and you said you read our lupa.
Do you need me to say yes? Yes.
We really, we've had these issues. You've seen it in Airmont where they've tried to stop houses of worship and have failed miserably.
Because they discriminated. They didn't apply
Well,
the
of
law.
course, that's what
Right,
happens.
right. So
When you make a law that isn't appropriate for a particular religion, and our lupa tells us we can't do that. There are some outs on it, but we can't do that. And the reason we haven't gotten in trouble for any of that is because we've made the proper accommodations within our zoning code, within the zoning board, in terms of giving proper variances for these types of organizations that need or want to practice religion closer to their homes. whether they're Jewish, whether they're Catholic, whether they're anything, Muslim, whatever it is. If somebody wants to build a house of worship, we have very limited ways of stopping it. This law tries to bring order and prevent chaos. So by designating a proper residence or proper home or proper house, proper word would be building, forget what I said before, by designating a proper building as a community house of worship, a neighborhood house of worship, etc., we encourage development that can be better controlled and that the community will benefit from as a whole, other than having just people build where they want to build, put where they want to put, and argue that their religion requires them to have it where they want it.
Thank you, Trustee Miller. We're not going to have this meeting become the pseudo hearing for the neighborhood house of worship. There's going to be ample opportunity. I don't want to cut you off, but we're not going to resolve your issues with the neighborhood house of worship law this evening. We're going to have a formal hearing, and you will be able to come back again to voice your any other questions or comments you may have with regard to the matter. Only because I want to kind of move things along. We could be here all night just discussing houses of worship, and we're going to have a formal hearing for that.
And I understand you're gonna have a formal hearing, and I appreciate you saying sorry but not sorry for not cutting me off, but cutting me off. I'm not trying to have a formal hearing right now. I really didn't get a chance to ask any of my questions.
Well, then ask your
How
questions then.
you keep saying that.
I don't want to cut you
so
off, but we're not going to have a
but you're
hearing on
cutting me
houses
off.
of worship.
You're cutting me off again.
I'm not cutting you off, okay? I'm trying to bring order to a meeting, okay? You could ask your question, okay? Ask your question, and I'm telling you right now, this is not going to be a hearing on houses of worship.
I wasn't trying. That was not my
Ms.
intention.
Martin, you're shaking your head, you're not trying. I understand what you're doing. I understand what you're doing. Ask your question.
Okay. So, so I'm not even going to ask the question I was going to ask. With regards to, you're saying that you're bringing this to order. I just want us to take into consideration the fact that we're making exceptions when it's residential or neighborhood. There seems to be exceptions with regards to applying for a special permit or a conditional permit. So you don't need to answer now, but I have a concern about that having any potential for bringing in order if they don't have to apply for a special permit.
Okay? So noted. Thank you. Ms. Colbert,
Nobody
Andrew,
knows 20 Pinell Court, speaking of houses of worship, 750
So we were
Chestnut
trying
Ridge
not to
Road.
speak of houses.
Well, 750 Chestnut Ridge Road in August was found, was charged with numerous violations, and now it's March, and nothing has happened there to the best of my knowledge, so I'm just wondering what's happening there.
I'll find out.
And part two is, I understand that the Gould property, they got a temporary certificate of occupancy way back when. I wanted to know if they complied with what they were supposed to comply with. And part two is, my understanding that it was found that they had done work in the gymnasium without proper permits.
No, first of all, from what I understand, the proper first of all, the court has still been overseeing the matter. My understanding.
Which matter, the Gould?
Gould.
Okay.
On 750, I have to find out.
All right.
I can't tell you. On Gould, to answer your question, the court is still, it's still under the court's jurisdiction. My understanding is the proper certificates of occupancy are being issued under court guidance. My understanding is that, not that there was work being done on the gymnasium. I think what needed to be done is certain permits, a certain type of permit had to be applied for because they can use the gymnasium. I think they wanted to convert it for office space or classroom space or something like that. And for them to do that, there was a particular mechanism that they had to follow because the building is okay as it is as a gymnasium, but if they want to retrofit it into offices or things of that nature, there's an extra step. And that, again, is under the auspices of the court. Still.
Okay. And 750 you're gonna find out about.
750, I have to find out.
Thanks very